public policy polling. Usually this liberal-leaning organization focuses on like the horse race and certain policy issues. But at this particular poll, they decided to focus on Paula Deen versus MLK, which is random. And what they found was that Georgia Republicans favor Paula Deen over MLK. In fact, if you look at the specific numbers, 73% find Paula Deen favorable, only 11% find her unfavorable. And when it comes to MLK, 59% say favorable, 28% unfavorable.
Who finds Martin Luther King Jr. unfavorable?
Racist.
Okay, mystery solved. Okay.
Really glad that we gutted the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah. All right. Now, several things about this. Number one, to be fair, they're not comparing them directly. They didn't say who do you like better, Paula Deen or Martin Luther King. But obviously in the numbers, the story is pretty clear as to who they like better. They're both from the state of Georgia, Paula Deen and Martin Luther King.
So Paula Deen was born in Albany, Georgia, and MLK was born in Atlanta, Georgia. So that's probably why they compared the two. Right.
And look, they should both have allegiance there because it's their home state. So if they're leaning towards Paula Deen, they're like, hey, you know what? She's from here and et cetera. I get that, right? But Martin Luther King is also from there and one of the most important Americans in history. He could barely muster up 59% approval. That's unbelievable, right? So 28% are like, him and frickin' Gandhi. What's up with those guys?
So public policy polling doesn't really get into the reasons, or they don't speculate as to why this is the case. But why do you think this is happening? I mean, I mentioned racism, but do you think that there's any legitimacy to that claim?
There must be.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, no matter what you think of Martin Luther King as a factual figure, the perspective that we have of Martin Luther King is a guy who helped get rights for a huge percentage of Americans, but beyond that, he helped to get us to a more perfect union, something that we now brag about all the time. Even the Republicans and the conservatives, like Glenn Beck, et cetera, say, no, he would have agreed with us because he didn't want to judge people based on the color of their skin, right? And they use that as an anti-affirmative action stance, et cetera. So it's an accepted thing that Martin Luther King was somebody who helped America become what it is, right? Now, the reason I say as a factual figure, if you got into a stance on the Vietnam War, I'm sure some conservatives would disagree, et cetera. So part of the 28%, my guess, is leftover guys who remember Martin Luther King and go, that guy wanted to help the poor and black folks and wanted to end that senseless war where millions of Vietnamese died and over 50,000 Americans died. And they didn't like King back then. Now, some of them for the non-racial issues, some of them definitely for the racial issues, and a lot of that 28% are people who didn't know him back then and who think, he helped black people, I don't like that, right? So yes, that's definitely a little depressing. And this is very important. Public policy polling is definitely leans progressive. There's no question about that. And in fact, when I saw some of their polling during the election, I thought, I don't know, man. These numbers are so startling, it's hard to believe. If you remember, it was their poll that asked Republican primary voters in Mississippi and Alabama whether they thought black people and white people getting married should be illegal. Now, I was like, come on, that can't be higher than 5%. But it turns out among Republican primary voters in those two states, it was about 25% who thought it should be illegal to have different races marry one another. But then, so is public policy polling accurate? So I was very curious at the end of the election, I looked at which polls did the best. Like, for example, Gallup, whichever was Gallup, it's so, it's such a well-known name, credible, big history, et cetera, was a disaster. Their polling did not match the results at all, okay? And Rasmussen, who earlier had done it, even though they leaned Republican, had been very accurate in 2004, for example, not for a number of different reasons on how they do the polls, have become a lot less accurate. Number one on the list, public policy polling. They got the election more right than any other polling organization, which then made me think, no, they know how to do polls. And so this poll is very likely to be largely correct, and what it tells you, it's a little ugly.